It was a normal summer Sunday evening in the UK. The humidity had been awful all week, so when the forecast promised thunderstorms, nobody thought much of it. If anything, we were looking forward to it. I spent most of Sunday charging the two portable power stations I take with me. Most people think of power banks as those little things you use to charge your phone. These were different, big enough to run my TV, my internet, even a cooker if I needed one. I always took two. I'd learned the hard way that draining the truck batteries wasn't worth the risk. There's nothing worse than trying to start a 44-ton Arctic at 4 in the morning and hearing nothing but a click, not a phone call you want to have to make. The thunder started at about 4 in the afternoon, that low, deep rumbling, the kind where it sounds miles away, but you know it's getting closer. There was that smell as well, the smell you get before rain, after it's been dry for a while. The only thing that really stood out was the sunshine, not a cloud in the sky. I always thought you needed clouds for thunder, but what do I know? At about 5:30, I was finishing my checklist before work. Car, sheets, bedding, water, both power stations fully charged, everything ready to go. Then, boom, the loudest crash I'd ever heard. I fully expected to look outside and see a head-on collision, or a plane down somewhere. Something, anything. The whole house shook. I went straight to the window. All I could see were giant black storm clouds and thick fog. I didn't even know you could get fog in the evening while it was still warm. But I could barely see my car on the drive. The streetlights had come on. I always thought they were on a timer. Apparently not. They must switch on when the light level drops low enough. It looked like someone had put a light bulb inside candy floss. Then the lightning started. Except it wasn't normal lightning. It wasn't striking down. It was moving across the sky. Fast. Really fast. It looked like glowing cars racing through the clouds. And every time one shot across the sky, there was this strange whipping sound. Then came another boom. Another house-shaking boom. This time, the sky lit up bright white, like someone had flicked on a giant light switch. For a split second, I could see the outlines of everything through the fog. That's when I saw one. It was hanging from the top of a lamppost. At first, I thought my eyes were playing tricks on me. It's hard to explain what it looked like. The closest thing I can compare it to is one of those spiders with ridiculously long legs. Except this thing was enormous. If it had stood upright, it would have been over 8 feet tall. I told myself it was the fog, or the lighting, or my imagination. Then it moved. Not climbed, not crawled, moved, effortlessly. 1 second it was hanging underneath the lamppost, the next it was sitting on top of it. No hesitation, no struggle, no sound. I had to be dreaming. This couldn't be real. Nothing looks like that. Nothing moves like that. Even if it was some kind of machine, machines don't move like that. Machines jerk. Machines hesitate. Machines make noise. This thing moved as if it were alive. Then I noticed more of them. One on the neighbor's roof, another on a car, then another, then another. I stopped counting. They were everywhere. Everywhere except the ground. It was like they were playing some twisted game of the floor is lava, like touching the ground would somehow be the end of them. Then the light disappeared. The sky went dark. Really dark. Even the streetlights were struggling now. The fog was so thick, it swallowed almost everything. It moved quickly too. When it reached the house and rolled across the windows, I was almost surprised there wasn't a sound. For some reason, I'd expected it to tap against the glass or rustle against the walls, but there was nothing, just silence and the fog. The shooting lightning became less frequent, but somehow faster. Now it looked less like lightning and more like glowing bullets crossing the sky. That's when I saw the torch. It was barely visible through the fog. I couldn't see who it was. I thought it might have been Pete. It came from the direction of his house. But the fog was so thick I could barely make out the torch itself. Never mind who was holding it. I didn't know if whoever it was had seen what I'd seen. The things on the rooftops, the things on the lampposts. They seemed to be walking slowly up the street, using the torch to try and see what was going on. The beam swept back and forth through the fog, searching. Then the beam stopped. It slowly tilted upwards, towards the top of one of the lampposts, and stayed there for a second, maybe two. Then it started moving away, slowly at first, then faster. Then whoever was holding it turned and started running. They couldn't have taken more than 4 or 5 steps. Then the torch shot straight up into the air, gone, swallowed by the fog. For a second, I couldn't see anything. Then the torch came crashing back down onto the road, and that was it. Nothing. I remember taking a step back from the window. My heart was hammering, because whatever I'd been looking at on those rooftops, somebody else had just seen it too. I stood there, staring at where the torch had landed, waiting for a scream, waiting for shouting, waiting for something, anything. But there was nothing, just silence. The only sound was the distant rumble of whatever was moving through those clouds. That's what scared me most. Not the thing on the lamppost, not the fog, the silence. An adult man had just vanished, and there hadn't been so much as a cry for help. No struggle, no impact, nothing. What can do that? What can pick up a grown man and make it look effortless? What can do it without making a sound? The next thing I heard was my phone, the emergency alert, the one they introduced a few years ago. Never really had much use for it before. The odd flood warning. Maybe. Now, it was screaming at me. I remember grabbing my phone and desperately trying to shut the alarm off, like it would make any difference. But it felt like it would. The message said, "Emergency alert. Stay indoors. Shut your windows and doors. Avoid contact with unknown entities. Stand by for further instructions." That was it. No explanation, no details, nothing. Just stay inside, lock your doors, wait. I still reached up and closed the little window at the top, even though it felt completely pointless. I tried calling Pete. At least if I could get hold of him, I'd know it wasn't him with the torch. It just kept ringing and ringing and ringing. No matter how many times I tried, he never answered. I slowly went downstairs to lock the front and back doors. Like being quiet, or at least quieter, would somehow make a difference. I double-locked the front door, put the chain on, then headed towards the back door. That's when I saw it. It was sitting on the fence between mine and Sharon's garden. The thing looked almost ridiculous. It was huge. It must have weighed a couple of 100 kilos. Yet somehow, it was perfectly balanced on the fence. It started moving slowly along the top of it. I ducked down as fast as I could, hoping it hadn't seen me. The thing that stood out most wasn't how big it was, or how strange it looked. It was the silence. I could have heard a pin drop. Yet this giant creature was moving along a wooden fence without making a sound. I remember thinking about a wildlife program I'd watched the night before. They were talking about jaguars. how they can enter water without making a sound. The presenter was amazed by it. They'd even put a microphone right next to the water. The jaguar stepped in. Nothing. Not a splash. Not a ripple. I remember thinking how impressive that was. Now I'm watching a giant creature move across land, and I can't hear a thing. It just doesn't compute. Once I was sure both doors were locked, I started closing the curtains. I'm still not sure why. It just felt right. Then I tried calling Dave. Dave used to be in the army, absolutely mental. But if anyone might know what was going on, it would be him. The first call rang out. No answer. I tried again. This time, it wouldn't even connect. Then I tried someone else. Same thing. My phone was just searching for service. Over and over and over. My next thought was weapons. I went through everything I had. Anything that could be used as a weapon. Even something makeshift. I found a club hammer, a large kitchen knife, a rolling pin, and a claw hammer. Hardly an elite commando loadout, but it would have to do. I thought about calling 999. Then I realized I had no signal. Maybe the police were already dealing with it. Maybe they were on their way. Maybe they already knew exactly what was happening. Or maybe they were just as confused as everyone else. I had no way of knowing. The government had sent out the emergency alert, so somebody knew something. The question was, how much? I knew somebody out there had to know what was going on. The government had sent the emergency alert. That meant somebody had information. So I turned the TV on. The presenter looked terrified. Not concerned, not worried, terrified. They kept saying information was still coming in. Every few minutes, another area on the map turned red. At first, it was a few isolated spots, then more, until it felt like the entire spine of the country was glowing red. The reports were all over the place. People seeing things on rooftops, people reporting strange shapes in the fog, entire neighborhoods going silent. Then one sentence caught my attention. Several reports suggest the entities are gathering on rooftops. Entities. That was the first time I'd heard anyone call them that. Not animals, not people. Entities. The TV didn't really have any answers. Just confirmation. Confirmation that this wasn't happening on my street or in my town. This was happening everywhere. I stood there for a moment, trying to think. What else do I need? Food? Water? More weapons? That's when I heard it. Tap, tap, tap. Not loud, not aggressive, almost gentle, almost calming. It would have been calming if it hadn't been coming from a second-floor window. I froze. There was no garage roof underneath it, no ladder, no ledge, nothing somebody could stand on. Yet something was tapping on the upstairs window. Tap, tap, tap. It lasted about a minute, maybe less. Then it stopped. Just stopped. There was no way I was going to check. I went back downstairs, sat in front of the television, and waited for the government briefing. The screen showed the lectern, the royal crest on the front, the plain grey backdrop behind it. The sort of background designed to offend absolutely nobody. Eventually, the Prime Minister walked out, flanked by two people. One of them looked like the Defense Secretary. The other one I didn't recognize. I don't remember seeing him before, not even during the COVID briefings years ago. The Prime Minister looked pale, tired, like he'd aged 10 years in a single evening. Then he started speaking. We are dealing with an unprecedented situation. The public should remain calm. The entities appear to static. No warning, no reconnecting screen, No technical difficulties message. Nothing. Just static. The kind of static that makes your stomach drop. I sat there staring at the screen, waiting for it to come back, waiting for the rest of the sentence. The entities appear to what? Appear to do what? What are they? What do they want? What do I do now? Fuck. I left the TV running. Not that it was showing anything useful, just static. But I left it on anyway. It felt wrong not to. I went around the house gathering everything together. If I was going to stay here, I wanted everything in one room, and it was definitely going to be downstairs. All I knew was that so far, they seemed to stay up high. Roofs, fences, lampposts. So I wanted to be as low as possible. I looked around at what I had. About 80 liters of water, mostly intended for the truck, but clean, drinkable. A club hammer, a kitchen knife, a rolling pin. Judging by what happened to whoever was carrying that torch, none of it was likely to make much difference. Still, it felt better than having nothing. The 2 power stations sat in the corner. Hopefully I wouldn't need them, because needing them would mean things were far worse than I wanted to believe. Then I heard something. A sound. A real sound. The first one I'd heard in what felt like ages. It sounded like a roof tile slipping, then falling, clattering onto the ground, fairly loud. Next door, maybe. I wasn't sure. I wanted to look. I really wanted to look, but I couldn't bring myself to do it. That was the first noise one of them had made. Any noise. Before that, I could almost convince myself it was all some kind of nightmare. A bad dream. A breakdown. Something. Now, it felt real. More real than ever. I still had absolutely no idea what I was supposed to do. Sit here. Wait. Hope. That seemed to be the entire plan. I did briefly think about moving to the truck. The thought crossed my mind. Then common sense kicked in. Moving all the water, moving the power stations, doing it quietly, doing it while those things were out there. It was ridiculous. Besides, just because I hadn't seen them on the ground didn't mean they couldn't use the ground. I found myself hoping I wouldn't need the water or the power stations, because that would mean this wasn't temporary, that this wasn't ending tomorrow. Then I noticed a faint blue flash reflected on the wall, just for a second. Then again, blue, blue, blue. An emergency vehicle. Must have been, probably on the dual carriageway. The sight of it was strangely comforting. It meant somebody was still out there. Somebody was still trying to do something. Then the silence broke. A scream. Not nearby. Further away, but getting closer. Fast. For a second, I thought maybe people were fighting back. Maybe the police had arrived. Maybe somebody was winning. I even started moving towards the window. Then I realized what I was hearing. It wasn't a scream of anger. It wasn't a scream of defiance. It was a scream of fear. Pure fear. The sort of scream somebody makes when they know they're in trouble. Real trouble. I could hear footsteps hammering against the pavement, getting closer, closer, closer. No. A man's voice. No, no, no. The footsteps got faster. Then, nothing. No crash, no struggle, no second scream. Nothing. Just silence. Complete silence. I never understood that phrase before. The silence was deafening. I understood it then, because somehow the silence felt louder than the scream. I sat back down in front of the TV, still showing nothing but static, still hoping any second it would spring back to life. The government would come back, tell us everything was under control, tell us help was on the way, Tell us what those things were. Tell us something, anything. I sat there for a while, I don't know how long, trying to process everything. Then the television turned off. I nearly shouted. I actually felt the sound start in my throat, but I stopped it. The room was dark, completely dark. For a second, I thought the power had gone. Then I realized the TV had just gone into standby, probably because it hadn't received a signal in hours. The relief was overwhelming. I still had power. I was scared to move now. Was it still outside? Did it know where I was? What did they want? My phone buzzed. I nearly jumped out of my skin. I'd turned it to silent, but the vibration still worked. Missed calls. Dave, Steve, Cameron, work, Mum. I immediately tried calling Mum back. Nothing. The signal had gone again. I didn't know if they were checking on me or asking for help. I didn't know if they were safe or if they were even still alive. I was just left there wondering, hoping everyone was okay. I didn't really have a clue what to do now. I wasn't sure if peeking through the curtain would reveal one of those things staring back at me. Waiting. I didn't know if help was coming. I didn't know if the people I cared about were safe. And right then, there wasn't a single thing I could do about it. That feeling was worse than anything. I spent the rest of the evening setting up a makeshift camp. The bedding went in front of the lamp, the club hammer by my pillow, the kitchen knife next to the water, the rolling pin on top of the power station. The TV was still showing static, but I left it on, just in case. Even though I'd made a bed, I doubted I'd be getting much sleep. Who could? Not with everything that was happening. Eventually, I realized I couldn't just sit there forever. At some point, I needed to look outside, so I slowly moved over to the curtains. I tried peeking through a small gap. Couldn't see a thing. I decided to switch the lamp off first. Then I looked again. The street was empty, completely empty. The rooftops were clear. The lampposts were clear. Had they left? Was it over? The only thing still out there was the torch, lying exactly where it had landed. The only sign that any of this had happened. I closed the curtains again, checked my phone, still no signal. The TV, still static. The rest of the night passed slowly. I tried making the room more comfortable. I emptied out a small drinks cooler, got rid of the beer, filled it with food from the kitchen, eggs, butter, bacon, bread, a saucepan, a frying pan, everything I thought I might need. Other than going to the toilet, I didn't really need to leave the room anymore. Eventually, dawn started breaking. Around 6 in the morning, I decided to make some breakfast. I plugged the little cooker into the power station, dropped some butter into a frying pan, then added bacon and eggs. I cooked slowly, trying not to make too much noise. The smell was comforting. For a moment, I almost forgot what was happening. Then, tap, 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 tap. I froze. It hadn't gone away. This wasn't a dream. This was real. I moved back to the curtain. Slowly, carefully, the street looked empty, just like before. But something was different. The torch was gone, not moved. Gone, completely gone. As far as I knew, nobody had been out there. So who moved it? Or what? Then I saw one, further down the road, walking casually along a fence. It stopped, then leapt, straight upwards, landing on a rooftop. The power behind the jump was unbelievable. But somehow, it still didn't make a sound. Not when it jumped. Not when it landed. Nothing. You could still hear a pin drop. Then I noticed movement across the road. A curtain. Moving. It was Amy. She was peeking through her window, just like I was. For a second, we just stared at each other. Then she gave me a wave, a thumbs up. I returned it. Then we both disappeared back behind our curtains. It was a strange feeling. Comfort. Up until that moment, for all I knew, I was the last person left. Seeing Amy changed that. My first instinct was to run across the road, hold up together, survive together. That idea lasted about 2 seconds. Then I remembered what was outside. So instead, I grabbed some paper and a marker. I wrote, "You okay?" big enough for her to read, then stuck it in the window. A few moments later, her curtain moved again. She saw it. A minute later, another sign appeared. "Why the bins?" I frowned, then looked outside. That's when I realized there were wheelie bins in the middle of the road. I hadn't even noticed them before. Then another one appeared. Not rolled, not thrown, appeared. Like it had simply been dropped from the sky. There was nothing above it. No trees, no power lines, nothing. So where were they coming from, and why? I pointed upwards. Amy shook her head, then disappeared. A few moments later, another sign appeared. No idea. "You good?" I couldn't help smiling. "All things considered." "You?" She read it, then nodded. For the first time since all this started, things felt almost normal. Then I saw it, a shape on her roof. I started waving frantically, trying to get her attention. "Get down! Get away from the window." The thing wasn't moving. It was just sitting there, watching. Then suddenly, it turned towards me. We locked eyes. At least I think we did. I still don't know if those things even have eyes. Its head tilted slightly, almost curious. Then it stood up. My stomach dropped. I thought it was coming for me. I froze, completely froze. Then it turned and jumped away. Gone. I stayed there for several seconds, trying to process what had just happened. Had it seen me? Did it know I was there? I looked back across the road. Amy's curtains were closed. I closed mine too. The television flickered, then died. The first power station was empty. I replaced it with the second one, knowing that when this one died, that was it. No more power. No more backups. I plugged the TV back in, left it switched off. Did the same with the lamp. The little cooler stayed plugged in. For now. The road outside kept changing. Every time I looked, there seemed to be more things piled in the street. Wheelie bins, bicycles, deck chairs, even what looked like a pub bench. It wasn't a roadblock, at least not a deliberate one. It looked random, like something was collecting objects, without understanding what they were. That evening, I noticed a sign from Amy. Just 2 words. "Thank you." I made one of my own. "Stay safe. See you tomorrow." Then I closed the curtains, turned on the lamp, and checked the power station. 37%. Would it last the night? I didn't know. Dinner was bread. Nothing special, but it was food. I sat there thinking about Mum, wondering if she was safe, wondering if I'd ever see her again, wondering if I'd ever see anyone again. The lamp flickered, once, then again. I stared at it, like I could somehow force it to stay on. The lamp flickered a final time. Then darkness. Complete darkness. Silence. Nothing. Until tap, 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 scratch.